the day, which is Education with Julie West, Parents for Truth, and Education President. And Kathy Hinters, our top cop, has all the lowdown on the Muslim Islamist Philly shooter. That and more straight ahead. It's 9:27 at WTN. The numbers right, as Andrea's were.
Well, if you don't play, you can't lose, Michael. It's hard. It's hard to believe. It's hard to believe $1 million. 25 folks getting $1 million is barely worth mentioning.
Well, you know, and then don't forget the pot's now up to 1.3 billion. Might be $1.5 billion. That's going to be the record, not just for America but for the world. That's a lot of volitional tax on the poor, and then whoever wins, they can look at somewhere upwards of 65 to 68% of that money going back to municipalities, state, and federal taxes. It's quite the scam if you can get away with it, but everybody seems to be all caught up in it. But this is what we have, Julie, because we don't prioritize education at the state level. So we say, we don't have any money left for our priorities because we spent it all on things the government shouldn't be doing. So now we're going to have this volitional tax, for our kids, the future in education. Gotta love it.
Right. And when Tennessee okayed a lottery, when we allowed it here, it was the idea that our highest achieving students would then be able to go to college for free, that we had to have a lottery for the children so that we wouldn't have to pay tuition for the ones who'd been working hard. And as a parent with a couple kids in college, that didn't work out the way we were all promised.
You haven't gotten your lottery scholarship yet?
Well, we got the scholarship, but all the universities did. And what they always do is when they get money from the government, they just double the price of tuition. So what difference did it make other than we can now give extra money for nothing?
It just never ends. It's interesting. We often take our cues from Europe. And as I've often said, if you're looking for crazy left, if you want a glimpse of the future, you can always look to California. That which is crazy in California today becomes very normal across the nation. That's why you don't turn a blind eye to Gavin Newsom, a mayor of San Francisco, in civil disobedience out in front of his office, just handing out marriage licenses, regardless of how the people of the state voted on what marriage should be. That all gets lost. The judges take back the state and, through imperialism. And next thing you know, now you have gay marriage nationwide. And it used to be the same with Europe. If Europe was doing something really leftist today, keep an eye out. It'll cross the ocean and get to America in about 15 years. And we're seeing some of that, obviously, with the rapefugees and refugees. But what's interesting is while we're removing, where God is completely, removed and yet still under attack in our schools, in Britain, for example, they're turning back to God and proclaiming themselves a Christian nation. Now, the question is it too late?
Well, hopefully, mathematically, they're in a tenuous position. But the fact that not only are they acknowledging that they're a Christian nation, the director of the schools, they're equivalent to a national commissioner or national director of education over there, basically has issued a mandate where students will be told that America or that England is a Christian nation, that atheistic and humanistic views do not need to be given equal time with the discussions of Christianity. And in fact, when discussing Christmas, the view that children are to be told is that this is when we acknowledge the birth of Jesus Christ, the Son of God, the Prince of Peace. Meanwhile, in Williamson County, Tennessee, we can't acknowledge that we don't go to school on December 25th because it's Christmas.
Even though that's on our government calendar just up the road in Nashville at the State House. It's interesting, though, but, my setup, I'd love to get your comment on that. We're always so quick to feel like Europe's so enlightened and take our cues of enlightenment from Europe, especially when it's away from faith issues. What are the odds we're going to take our cues back to faith from Britain?
Well, and I think what's happened in Britain and what's happening around Europe now, I think, is with the influx of the refugees, if that's what they're to be called, with the influx of so many radicals in their nations and tragedies like what happened in France, they've had enough. And they're done, at least with the political correctness on that level. And they're saying, this is absolutely too much. We're going to start speaking truth again. And by the way, if these refugees don't like it, well, then they can leave, or they don't
Well,
have
it really
to be
is.
here.
It's what nobody talks about, Julie. It's really an issue of assimilation, right? In other words, people have a
Right.
right to be agnostic, be atheist. They have a right to worship other gods. They have a right to be Muslim, quite frankly. But the country itself does have an origin, a heritage, and an intent, and it has every right. Because if somebody's going to assimilate, and what we're seeing in Germany is Germany wants to assimilate to Sharia. In Britain, they're reminded of what they are, reminded of the difference, and politically correctly reminded that, wait a minute, they're the guest, we are who we are, and by being who we are, being under attack, we're kind of getting back in touch with that, and we don't feel a need to validate outside thoughts. They don't erase what collectively we've always been or what we are. And so, but it'll be very interesting. This, America's always taking its cues from California and Europe. Will they this time?
Well, on this one, I would to God that we would take our cues from Europe. Unfortunately, we've got school districts here in the U.S. that continue to take their cues from the ACLU. We have a school district that just this week, after decades of tradition, after the students in the school district say the Pledge of Allegiance, I believe it was New Jersey, that
they do God Bless
school,
America, and then they had a problem with that.
Yeah, right. That they simply say God Bless America, which, by the way, is what Barack Obama will say when he concludes his final State of the Union address. It's something that is constantly said, but no, that's too much. And well,
there's one other thing to note here, Julie. I would respect the school district more if they took on the ACLU, went to court and lost and then stopped. But as is often the case, it just takes the threat and they back down. And that's why you get so many threats. They never really stand up to it. The school system is so easily intimidated. And here's another example. The ACLU did not sue, take them to court and win. They merely threatened to, and they caved.
Absolutely. And it's the constant caving and placating the left that's why America is today. There's one other story that really struck me, well, all kinds of crazy things, but something that I think is worth mentioning. There was this past week a student who over Christmas break wrote an op-ed for the school papers. It was two different views on the Black Lives Matter and what happened at the university, or has been happening at the University of Missouri. The student who wrote the article critical of Black Lives Matters has received nearly constant death threats since the article in the school paper went online, which tells you a lot about how free students believe, if they're being instructed in school that I can disagree with everything you believe, but I'll fight for the right to the death for your right to say it. But apparently kids are missing that. And the really troubling thing that I didn't see in the articles, that you don't see in the reports, is you don't see where the students who are making the death threats have been arrested. Because the student who's being threatened can't go back to school. And he said, these were kids who were in my class that I would see every day. And now they and their family are threatening the lives of me and my family. And you don't get, if it had been the other way around, well, they would have sent out the police immediately. So there are lots and lots of not just
there's no such thing as
enabling.
There's no such thing as reverse racism. There's just racism. This is clearly a case of that. And these threats are criminal threats, and they are hate crimes, and yet none's being prosecuted. And it must be so frustrating to be on that campus too, when the Black Lives Matter leaders have been caught lying and making so much up. and yet their threats are real and going ignored. Julie West is the Parents for Truth in Education president. She joins us every Monday or sooner if conditions warrant. You actually kind of, we probably have an opportunity, and it's somewhat of a 2-week homework assignment for you, but coming up is School Choice Week, and it'll be recognized January 24th through the 31st. So not this week, but next week. No, not this week or next week, but the week after. It might be a great opportunity for us 2 weeks from now in our Monday visit to kind of, thoroughly vet the whole school choice issue. What's keeping us from doing it? These notions of competition breeds excellence, or, who really do these kids belong to? And, we did just fine without the federal government in the education business prior to 1979, which seems like yesterday for me. But, just to kind of explore what school choice is, what it's not, why the intelligentsia community and those on the left and in government hate the thought of it, giving parents the right to choose, and what it could mean in terms of real improvements, not just throwing money or leftist ideology, but real improvements to education. That might be a fun thing for us to do in a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Got all sorts of material on that. I'll get to work on that. And I'm sure, by the way, session, as you know, starts tomorrow, and lots of great legislation regarding education, including potentially the expansion of some of the ESAs.
And we're down to 30 seconds, but last week we closed our segment when I asked you the top 3 or 5 things for education this year, and you might want to revisit them because legislatively they are opportunities for us.
We have ESAs for special needs students, meaning educational savings account, that those are kicking off, that we have potentially elected superintendents. No one in the state seems to be too thrilled with their superintendents, and if we want to put a stop to the bidding war, that would do it. And I think finally, there's a rally about it on January 19th, although not directly related to education, but just saying if the federal government wants to put mandates on us that violate our views and our state constitution, then not a dime of taxpayer money will go to fund it. And if we can push back in education that way, it would be a glorious
By the way, as Meatloaf saying, if we could get 2 out of 3, that wouldn't be bad for the new year. Julie West, Parents for Truth president. You'll find her on Facebook at Parents for Truth in Education, or you can tweet her at
Julie, the number 4 truth.
Talk to you next Monday or sooner if conditions warrant. Thanks.